Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this new episode of The Numbers. And I mean, I got a YouTube comment a couple of weeks ago that they didn't like our little chatter. We talked for, I think, 90 seconds and it was a bit too much. But we got so much to do this time. I'm not even sure if we can afford to do the chit chat this time, but I will anyway. Just how you doing, Philippe?
How about that weather? I'm kidding. No, I'm doing well. My college semester is starting this week. Back to school. The Cégep starts in mid-August,
that's right.
So we're right there. And according to the pollsters in this country, we are right back into it, huh?
Yeah.
We have tons of stuff this week to discuss. Federally, we have provinces, we have by-elections, we have tons of stuff. And so, yeah, how are you, Eric? How are you doing these days? Are you ready to be back? Yeah?
I am good, yeah, and it does actually kind of feel like things are starting to get. I know that especially in Quebec when the school starts going again, that really gets things going. But it does starting to feel like everybody's starting to come back to Ottawa. We're starting to see a lot more polls. So yeah, it does feel like we're getting into it. So let's get into it on
absolutely
these federal numbers. So we had in the last week. We had national polls from Nanos, Abacus, Research Co. Ecos put out some numbers. We got a rare thing, a poll of Atlantic Canada from Narrative Research, which some numbers for each of the provinces, including PI, which we never see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where do you want to start with all of these? They're all kind of the same, except for the Ecos poll is a bit different, but we can chat about that a little bit. But what's your takeaway from these numbers?
Okay, so if we look at just August numbers, right? And we exclude Nanos here for a second. So the Conservatives, 42, 43, 41, 40, 41, and then we have this 38 from Ecos. It's lower, Ecos, 38%, but it's also well within range of the others. I mean, for those who say it's an outlier, it's really not an outlier when you're within range of the others. It's just a bit lower. I remember, a few weeks ago, we had a Main Street research that had the Conservatives at 45, and then we haven't seen that again. So it's somewhere in the low 40s. It's very stable. And as for the Liberals, again, we look at the latest numbers. In the summer months, we have seen numbers from 23 to 27. And it's so... In a bracket of 4 points, that's extremely stable for polls of different methodologies, different firms. So no real movement throughout the summer for both main parties. And I also looked with the NDP, all the numbers are between 16 and 20. So again, a bracket of 4 points. Extremely stable and no improvement on average for the Liberals. That's my big takeaway. Which is, I think, it's a kind of copy paste from past weeks, right?
Yeah.
But every week we get closer to next year's election, and so not really good news for the Liberals as they now go into their cabinet retreat to refocus for the fall session.
It is kind of remarkable how stable things have been now since pretty much the beginning of the year. With, as you said, a few exceptions when the Conservatives are at 44, 45, or some 38s or 39s. They're usually in that 41 to 42 range, which is why they get as high as 45 and as low as 38 sometimes.
That's right.
The Liberals are somewhere, it seems, around 24, 25, and then they'll get a few points higher than that. The NDP seems to have dropped a little bit. It's rarer now to see them at the 20, 21 that you'd once in a while get. So maybe they're somewhere around 18, 19. But it's just been holding on. So it makes you wonder if anything is going to shift it, and if anything can shift it. If the fact that people have been so locked in for the last about 8 months, with the Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP not moving around, are we poised for polling that's going to continue like this for the next year, or are we poised for a sudden thing that changes everything? I don't know. Like I could be persuaded by either of these that that's a possibility, but. If you're the NDP, things aren't getting better.
No.
If you're the Liberals, things aren't getting better. And if you're the Conservatives, it doesn't seem like you've peaked too soon. You might have peaked. They might have hit their ceiling.
Yeah.
But this is a good ceiling to be stuck at.
But it's a peak right? A peak means that you go down after. That's what it is, a peak, right? I mean, maybe it's semantics
plateau
here, but it's a plateau. It's not a peak because you've been in the 40s. I mean, I'm looking at my rolling averages on 338 right now. I'm just looking. The last time the NDP on average was at 20% is December. And then they went down 19, 18, 17, 18, 17, and they've been hovering there. So, yes, there is a net drop for the NDP. The Conservatives at the turn of the year, at my last projection just at Christmas, was 39%, and they haven't been below the 40% mark since. So that's not a peak, that's a plateau. Now, can it go down? Obviously, we do not know what the future holds, and you know as well as I do that election campaigns that end the way they began in the numbers are the exceptions rather than the rule. It happens that just the numbers are just flat. I'm thinking of Doug Ford, for instance, in Ontario, where the numbers just never change throughout the campaign. But usually when a campaign begins, the numbers get moving because more people pay attention and they're on the news every single day trying to influence you to get your vote. And so I think many Canadians either have been paying much attention, or as you said, they're locked in, and so that's why I think the numbers are so stable. It's remarkable to have stable numbers like this. They don't tell all the same stories, but when you do the average every week, you realize it's always the same numbers. So a new plateau for the main three parties.
Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned, there was that narrative poll that had some actual numbers from Atlantic Canada, which we don't often see. The overall numbers for the region were perfectly normal, 43 Conservative, 32 Liberal, 19 NDP. But it was also interesting that it was uniform across those four provinces, that the Conservatives were somewhere between 41 and 45, didn't matter where it was. The Liberals were between 30 and 35. The NDP had more support in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador, about double what they had in New Brunswick and PEI. So it does seem like they should be in play in the Halifax area, in the St. John's area. And then the Greens seemingly have picked themselves off the mat a little bit, had 10% in New Brunswick, 13% in PEI. So just interesting to get this portrait of the region because we rarely do. Yeah. And when we do, it's usually from Angus Reid Institute, so it's only one pollster, and it's an online, so we don't have anything else to go to compare it to. But this is an old-fashioned phone poll from Narrative, so appreciate seeing this. But it doesn't change my mind about what I was already thinking about the Atlantic Canada. But that's always good when things confirm what you're thinking, right? So that you're not just kind of making things up. But, you know, you look at, I noticed in the last week, Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh were both in PEI. The Liberals hold all four seats. They've won all four seats for the last three elections. Conservatives have a 6-point lead there. And in a province that, you know, is pretty uniform in terms of its support, that could be enough to flip all four seats. So just, did you have any thoughts when you saw these numbers out of the region?
Well, one thought. We know that the fraction of undecideds usually is highly dependent on mode. When you do a phone poll, or you do an online poll, or you do even an IVR, the undecideds move around a lot, even though the main numbers generally look about the same. But still, this is a phone poll, and you see the undecideds per region. 27% in New Brunswick, 30% in Nova Scotia, 25% in Newfoundland Labrador, 25% in PEI. That's a lot of people who say they are undecided. And so that race is not over. I mean, the Conservative lead in Atlantic Canada is real because basically all the polling firms point towards that, even Narrative, which is the local pollster. But it's not solid. Historically, we know the Liberals do better on average than elsewhere in Canada with Atlantic Canadians. And so the fact that there's so many undecideds tells me that it's not over there. It's not settled. It's not like the numbers we see out of BC where the Conservatives are somewhere between 45 and 50 in every poll. And suddenly you see, okay, well, no matter what the Liberals get in BC, we're talking about a handful of seats. Here, not the same. The ridings are smaller, so you have only to convince a few more people to go on your site to flip mini seats. So very interesting. Thank you, Narrative, for doing this. I know it's a quarterly thing, but I don't remember seeing federal numbers quite often. Usually they do the provincial ones, right?
Yeah, the provincial ones come out quarterly. The federal ones, I think sometimes they put them out once a year. We'd love to see them more often. Why not?
Absolutely.
There was some other also interesting stuff in the polls that came out this week. The Abacus had some more kind of questions about the motivation behind support. For example, they asked Conservatives if they were voting because they like Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives primarily, or that they dislike Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. It was 60-40 that people were voting for the Conservatives because of Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau. So there's a big chunk of voters that are primarily motivated by wanting to change the government. And then when they asked the same thing of NDP voters, that seemed a bit more solid. 79% were doing it because they liked Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, only 21% because they didn't like Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. So it does kind of show how the Conservatives have built up, I think, their big lead, in part because they've done a good job in terms of their strategy in presenting Pierre Poilievre, and he's done a good job in trying to reach new people. But there's also just an element that is, it's time for a change, and the Conservatives are seen as the best alternative, and that's a big chunk of their voter too. Yeah. And that's all right. That's not a bad place to be going into a campaign. But
exactly,
it does bring up the possibility of what happens if the Liberals change leaders. How many of those 40% would say, "Well, I still dislike the Liberals, so we need to change"? I don't know.
But here's the thing. Again, when we look at the seat projections, and I know many people, especially our members, who are a fan of proportional representation, or at least electoral reform, will point that the Liberals, on average, since the election, lost like 8 points, right? That is significant, but that is not like dramatic. It's 8 points. And so let's say the Liberals change leaders or change something and get back half of that. If they have 3-4 more points, even though it seems like, no, I know in raw numbers that would be hundreds of thousands of people, but if they get back 3-4 points, the Conservatives would be in minority territory. But those 7-8 points, maybe 9 points that the Liberals have lost, they all went to the Conservatives. And that's why the seat projections are so lopsided. So, good stuff from Abacus. I like these kinds of questions. That 80-20 for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, that's the remaining NDP voters, right? We know that some NDP voters from 21 and maybe earlier went to the Conservatives. We see this in the numbers. So could the Liberals gain from the NDP in a campaign? Maybe a point or two, but those numbers indicate that they can't bank on that to regain power, or to retain power, or even to make it close.
Is there anything else you want to discuss with these numbers before we move on to some of the provinces?
Some regional numbers caught our eyes. Earlier this month we talked about Abacus having the Conservatives tied for first in Quebec. It caught the eye of a lot of journalists, and it's fine because it was spectacular. I think it's fair to mention that Abacus did a new release earlier this week, and they have the Conservatives up in Quebec, but not in first place. They have them at 26%, not at 31%. So it was a fluctuation. It was a quirky sample, but it's fair to mention again that clearly the Conservatives in Quebec are not at 18% anymore. They're somewhere in the mid-20s. And in the mid-20s, it hurts the Liberals, and it may hurt the Bloc Québécois a little bit with respect to their expectations. The Bloc Québécois right now finishes first in seats in Quebec, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
That would be the first time since 2008. But if they dream of 45 seats, if the Conservatives take up a quarter of the vote, it might be difficult.
Well, it's the annoying thing with how polls are covered, right? Because the 26% still a great result for the Conservatives. The 31% was, a very high one for them. There were lots of articles written about the Conservatives being in first place. I'm not sure if we're going to see a lot of articles about how the Conservative support has plummeted 5 points in a couple weeks, because it's not a real thing. It's not just like the 31 was just a bit of a fluke. The fact that they've now dropped 5 points in, I think, literally 2 weeks is also not a real thing, right? But it doesn't get the same amount of attention. At least it shouldn't, because we shouldn't see a big. If we see a headline, "Conservative support plummeting in Quebec," that would be almost just as bad as the first headlines, which was "They're now in first place forever."
Hey, we're doing our best. We do what we can here, people. Okay, don't blame us.
There's also just a bit of news. René Arsenault, the Liberal MP for Madawaska-Restigouche in northern New Brunswick, not running again for re-election. The Liberals are now up, I think, to around 18 MPs who aren't running for re-election. That sounds like a lot, but it's actually not that much. You usually do get somewhere around 10-15% of the House not running again for re-election in an election campaign. But every time the Liberals lose one of their incumbents, it just, I think, makes it a little bit harder for them to hold those seats than when they're already losing support. So another departure for the Liberals. Since we were talking about New Brunswick, why don't we stick with New Brunswick?
Yeah.
Because we actually got a poll.
I know, right?
Oh, my God.
A poll from New Brunswick. It had been, aside from the quarterly narrative, it had been a while.
Oh,
when was the last non-narrative poll? I have the answer to this. I'll look it up, but it's been a long time. Especially, there's an election in New Brunswick in October. Apparently. I think we should. So the last non-narrative research poll was from Léger in December 22. So
holy jeez. That's
almost 2 years. Almost 2 years. So, what does the poll say, Eric? From Nanos, what does it say?
It was from Nanos, and apparently it was just self-published by Nanos. It wasn't commissioned, which is interesting. They decided to dip their toes in. Had 36% for the Liberals, 36% for the Progressive Conservatives, 14% for the Greens, 10% for the NDP, and 5% for the People's Alliance. This isn't dissimilar from the polls we've seen from Narrative, which has, when you take into account the margin of error, the small samples, has more or less put the Liberals and the PCs in a tie. The regional results were a bit strange in that support was uniform across the province. I would have loved to have seen an Anglophone-Francophone breakdown, because it didn't quite make sense to see the PCs tied. They're actually a bit ahead in northern New Brunswick. I guess it depends on how they define northern New Brunswick, and but that's actually one of the things that I think is really going to be interesting in this campaign, is that in past elections, the Liberal vote has been super inefficient because they run up the numbers among Francophones and don't do well among Anglophones in the South. But all the polling we've seen, again, small regional samples, but from also what I've heard from some people who are polling out there for the parties, is that the Liberals are doing better among Anglophones in the South. So maybe that vote inefficiency won't be as strong. And the fact that you get a poll that has the Liberals and the PCs tied doesn't mean that's a PC win. It might mean a toss-up 1 or 2 seat decision. Yeah.
In the North, again, small sample size, people, it's 157 cases. What's that? Plus or minus 8, plus or minus 7, I think. 30% for the PCs, 28% for the Liberals. We expect the Liberals to win by how much? Like 15, 20 points in the North?
At least. More than that.
And in the South, 27 PCs, 27 Liberals. That's a really good number for the Liberals.
Yeah. So I think that's before the removal of the undecided. So yeah.
Yeah. So what is the South? Because they have Moncton and area. So Moncton would be excluded from the South. Mm-hmm. Is Fredericton North or South? It should be South. It should be south, but it's close to the middle. Again, it depends on your definition here. Because if the South in this poll includes Fredericton, that's a really good poll for the Liberals. But if you just look at face value, I looked at the top line numbers, 36-36, I that's a PC win. Hang on, though. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we're heading to a BC 2017 in New Brunswick.
The projection I did this week, it almost made me laugh. It was 23 PCs, 23 Liberals, 3 Greens. Can you imagine? The other thing I'd highlight from this, 10% for the NDP. They're not going to get 10%.
Not happening.
Sorry if you're a New Democrat supporter. You got less than 2% of the vote in the last time. If you run a full slate of candidates, that would be impressive. So where'd that vote going to go? And 5% for the People's Alliance. Again, they're not really a flesh and blood party that much anymore. Yeah. Are they going to get 5%? I don't think so. So not a knock against the polling; it's a knock against the respondents. What are they going to do if the vast majority of them don't have an NDP or People's Alliance candidate to vote for, they're going to have to go somewhere or stay home. So there's probably at least 10 points out of that 15 that has to have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Maybe it distributes kind of evenly so it doesn't change anything, but still, it's going to have an impact. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of the campaign, we have some more realistic numbers for the NDP and People's Alliance as respondents to the polls start to know, how much of an organization these parties actually have.
To make a link with the federal poll from Narrative in New Brunswick, well, we see throughout Atlantic Canada where the Greens do well, the NDP does much less well, right? So les communicating vessels, les vases communicants, for NDP voters, potential NDP voters in New Brunswick, could really help the Greens. If the NDP doesn't have a candidate, will they go to the Liberals automatically? I'm not too sure. The Greens at 10% seems a bit low here. If the NDP gets cut in half in such numbers, I could see the Greens getting up to 14-15%. But if that's the case, again, I mean, the Greens could find themselves in a great scenario holding the balance of power in a minority situation. But yeah, let's hope for more New Brunswick polls because we've talked a lot about BC, and with good reason. BC should be very interesting. We're talking about realignment, right? But New Brunswick could be a lot of fun too because those numbers really threw me off. And so, I'm looking forward to the next big sample size. I mean, I know Léger will do one or two during the campaign and maybe 900 or 1,000 cases. That's going to be very interesting.
You mentioned British Columbia. Let's get to there. We had two polls out over the last week. One from Abacus, 42% for the NDP, 37 Conservative, 10 BC United, 10 Green. And then one from Main Street, 39 Conservative, 36 NDP, 12 BCU, 11 Green. We were wondering what was going to happen when we saw an IVR poll.
We were. Yeah.
This isn't as dramatic as I thought it would be. Yes, there's a big difference here. 5-point lead for the NDP in one versus a 3-point lead for the Conservatives. One of the modes is closer to the reality, or it's right in between. Who knows? But like when you look at the Conservative numbers in recent polls, it's been like 39, 37, 38.
Yep. When
you look at the NDP, it's been 42, 41 for the online polls, and then this 36.
Yeah.
It's difficult for us, I find, because I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to believe here.
Okay, so small comparison here. If we look at only Main Street research, so 3-point lead for the Conservatives, we agree considering the sample size, it was I think 900 cases. That's a statistical tie. Mm-hmm. And Main Street research, it's no secret that tend to have the NDP a little, not too much, but a little lower. If we look at the polling only from Main Street research in BC, in March they had the NDP at 40. In April it was 38, then 37, then 36. So they see a steady and very slow erosion of support. If we look at other polls, like let's say like on the field regularly, so we have Research Code, the local poster, over that same period, from the winter to now, the summer, 46, 45, 42, 40, 41. The trends are the same. We don't know where the water level is, but the trends are exactly the same. The NDP has lost like 5 points, roughly, in the last 6 months in BC. So we were wondering whether it would be a mode disagreement. The mode disagreement is still there. It's not as dramatic, as you said, Eric, but they both see the same trends. Now, the Conservatives, if they are in the upper 30s, do they win the election? I mean, BCU seems to have hit a new floor at 10%, or roughly 10%. Well,
you're going to say that? I'm not going to say that.
Well, for now. But the floor could still crack, and they could find themselves go even lower.
The floor could be a lot lower. This could be the floor above the basement.
I'm not sure if those voters that are sticking with BCU would automatically go to the Conservatives during a campaign, because they haven't yet. I mean, if they haven't changed their mind like many, Like BCU lost 20 points in a year, and most of the points, almost all of them, went to the Conservatives. Those who have stayed clearly are resisting the Conservatives.
By now they know.
Yeah, they know. So, but they haven't jumped ship to the NDP either. So they could be kingmakers here. So I don't know. This poll from Main Street, I mean, again, we have the mode disagreement. It's there. It's not that high, but it's there. So the next few, I mean, I think Leger is going to go back on the field soon. We expect Angus Reid. They're right there in Vancouver. And I know that other IVR firms, such as Palace Data and the others, will also go there. Will we see those lines where there's a gap between the onlines and the IVRs? If that stays the same, that's going to be very interesting on election night, because clearly somebody will right and wrong. If Abacus has 42 for the NDP and Main Street has 36, I'm sorry, that's too wide a gap for both them to be right. If it's 39, right in the middle, but odds are somebody's right and somebody's wrong, even though it's not that much. So
the 36 from Main Street, it's, for me, one of the reasons why I have more faith in the online numbers is because they make a bit more sense. Because the NDP, look, I'm just pulled up the NDP's historical results, okay? If we exclude the 2001 election, where Oussal Desange led the party and they got 22%, like the party had a decade of some scandals and everything, they were just off the rails. But these are the numbers for the last few elections, okay? And I'm going to keep going back. 2020, 48%. 2017, 40%. 2013, 40%. 2009, 42%. 2005, 41%. 1996, 39%. 1991, 41%. 1986, 43%. 1983, 45%. 1979, 46%. 1975, 39. 1972, 40. And then it's 1969, they're at 34. So, with the exception of 2001... Since 1972, the party always gets at least 39%. Yeah. So it makes me feel like the floor is kind of high for the BC NDP, and 36 would be a really bad result historically for them. It would be their second worst result since the first time they came to power. So that's why when I see these 41, 42s for the NDP in the online polls, I'm like, okay, that tracks. That is kind of their floor. I don't know if they can break through it. And if the NDP is managing to get 41, 42, it's hard, I think, to see the Conservatives getting to the 41, 42, 43 they probably need to win, because the map isn't that good for them. So that's kind of where I sit. But if I was the New Democrats, I would be I'd be white knuckling this for the next couple of months, because the trends have been going badly. The issue set is not good for the NDP. But somehow they're still holding on. But that would make me very, very nervous.
And also, you just skipped over the 2001, 2000.
Yeah, that's the one exception.
I mean, they had been in power for a while. Now the NDP has been in power for 7 years. Incumbency at some point wears on you, right? Mm-hmm. Could the NDP slip to just below the 40% mark after being in power for 7-8 years? Yeah, it's possible. But again, that BCU number, like if during the campaign, BCU keeps being in high single digits, low teens, I'm betting that some of those voters will change their minds, or maybe even stay home, which will elevate the other parties by default. I mean, you may be right that there's a hard floor, but we also are in new territory, because this is a new party with a bunch of rookies. We're talking about the Conservatives here, and they are supported by their federal cousins, like something we haven't seen in BC in decades. So I mean, I know the Liberals in BC were in power during the Liberals' power in that federal level, but they were not that close friends. I mean, am I wrong about this? Whereas the Rostad people and the Poiliev people, they share a lot of values. So,
apparently Christy Clark is getting ready for a run at the federal Liberal leadership. Did you hear? She's taking French lessons in France.
I mean, maybe she's running for the Senate. I don't know. No, Why not, right? I mean,
Anyway, if you're trying to learn French to become a leader in Canada, probably don't go to France.
No,
I'm guessing you're not spending most of your time actually learning French. You're probably drinking some rosé.
Go to Saguenay or something.
Go to Trois-Pistoles.
Go Gaspésie. It's beautiful. You get to So why not? Okay. So
wine isn't as good. Saskatchewan.
Okay.
We got a poll this morning.
This morning, Thursday morning, from the Angus Street Institute.
Everybody's starting to come out of the woodwork, eh? We're getting polls from New Brunswick, BC,
everywhere.
Saskatchewan. Hey, things are getting going. We love it.
So earlier this month, we had the local pollster in Saskatchewan, in Citrix, that had a statistical tie with the NDP slightly ahead of the Sask party. And I think you and I both raised an eyebrow or two.
Mm-hmm.
Not
48,
that they're
47.
wrong. Not that they're wrong. It's just that the Sask party seems to be still strong in the numbers, but Citrix says, no, hang on here. They're doing really badly in the cities. And then Angus Street this morning, 49% province-wide for the Sask party, 42 for the NDP.
More or less the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, as you said, 42 for the NDP.
42 for the NDP, which is a good result for them. That's 11 more points than in a past election if it holds up.
Yep.
But that's not enough, is it?
No,
that's not enough.
And like you look at the numbers inside by region, they're ahead by 22 points in Regina. That should win them most of the seats, probably not all.
Not all.
And that's right there. You might as well just pack it up. You're not going to form government. Only ahead by 5 points in Saskatoon. Not nearly enough to win a lot of those seats. A lot of those outlying seats are going to stay with the Sask party. And then the Sask party is ahead by 25 points in the regions. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting more than that. Often we see in the online polls, getting that rural vote is usually a little tough. But it doesn't really matter because we know that they're going to win almost all those seats. But you look at the two city poll results, Regina, Saskatoon, good results for the NDP.
Not enough.
Probably their best results since 2003. Not enough. Not enough. But it is competitive. It's still like the NDP getting 42% in Saskatchewan. That is pretty good when you think about it these days.
It really is.
It's not good enough to win, but like federally, the NDP is not getting 25% of the vote in Saskatchewan. So it is going to be an interesting election, and like if I'm a Sask party MLA from one of the cities, I'm pretty concerned about this election. Yeah. But if I'm the premier, I'm not that concerned. He'll be fine.
The age breakdown, interesting. So the NDP among young voters, 18 to 34, we see 58% for the NDP, 31% for the Sask party. That's a 27-point lead. If you look at the 55 years old and older, 66 for the Sask party, 28 for the NDP. Right there's a ballot box bonus for the Sask party among older voters. I still don't think that the election will be very competitive. It's going to be compelling because we have a dynasty here. That's the closest numbers that we have seen since the Sask party took power in 07?
2007.
07, yeah. So it's been a while. Mm-hmm. But it's just that, 5-point lead in Saskatoon is not enough. They need a 25-point lead. They need to sweep Saskatoon. Yeah. And that's not enough. I would say, however, again, this poll came out this morning, so I haven't had time really to dive much into it. I have the report right in front of me. I see the report from Angus Reid. It has 208 respondents from Saskatoon and 217 from Regina. I am guessing that this is unweighted because Saskatoon has more population than Regina. So, I'm not saying the poll is wrong. I'm just saying maybe we're missing information here. But Saskatoon, 5-point lead for the NDP, not enough. They need, as I said, they need 20 to 25 points ahead in Saskatoon. Otherwise, it won't be even close. That the count will be on that night, and 1 hour into it or half hour into it, will be okay. This is a Sask party victory. But still, Mrs. Beck is doing better than her predecessors so far. Will it translate into the ballot box? October 28th. So we'll see.
And you know what? If she can manage this and gets the party up to 20, 22 seats, she'll be the first Sask NDP leader to stay on probably for more than one election. So since Lauren Calvert, I think it was.
Does
Dwayne Lingenfelter in 2011, he got defeated. You got Cam Broughton. Broughton was defeated in 2016. He lost his riding. You had Ryan Miley, who won his riding. He was finally the first one who did, but it only came, I think, after they counted the mail ballots. But he didn't hang on. So the NDP could use a leader that is going to be there for 2 elections and maybe finally have a longer-term plan for what this party is going to do.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? There will be an open spot for a federal NDP leader. Does Ms. Beck speak French? Does she speak French?
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe she should go to France. Spend some time in the Riviera.
No, go to Longueuil or something.
Longueuil. Alberta, we had a poll, 48 for the UCP, 40 for the NDP. This came from Léger. Thoughts on this one? The election's very far away.
Yeah, very far away, but this is still, a poll shortly after the new leader of the NDP was elected. Of course, Monsieur
Nenshi.
Nenshi, I'm sorry. Yeah, Nenshi, sorry.
Jeez.
Blanking. I'm tired.
Kim Campbell a couple of weeks ago. Susan Holt before that.
I know. Hey, I got Kim Campbell in that quiz. It just took me a minute or two.
It took about half an hour, yeah.
We have the tapes. So no bonus for the NDP, but no dip really outside of what we're used to. But the UCP is still cruising. Not much more to say about this poll in Alberta. Steady as she goes.
And we also got some news. I was pretty surprised by how this all unfolded. So Todd Smith, the education minister in Ontario, who's been an MPP for a while, since I think 2011, resigns. Leaves cabinet very abruptly. He was like tweeting stuff like days before, and then he's just gone. And then the by-election's called right away, right afterwards. Todd Smith resigned on Friday.
Yeah.
By-election called on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm shocked by that. I don't know why the PCs are rushing. I guess they want to have him in before Queen's Park returns in October, I think it is, when they're coming back. I don't know. I don't know why they did this so fast, because, I mean, they're going to win this.
Eric calls it. Calls it.
I've seen enough. It's 49% he had in the last election. The NDP was second with 21. The Liberals had 18. But anyway, it's just, for me, the timing is interesting because everyone's talking about an early election in Ontario. I guess they're not going to go this fall, because why bother doing a by-election if you're just going to go in the fall? But I don't know. I thought maybe they'd drag this one out and just send everybody to the polls in the spring.
I think it's the federal Liberals dragging until the last minute to call by-elections that have warped our perceptions here. This is how it's supposed to be done. Oh, you're resigning? Okay, let's replace you. That's how it should be done. Not you resign in January and then late in June at 11:59 p.m. Oh, there's going to be a by-election at the latest possible time. So this is how it should be done. But yeah, we could still have an early election in Ontario. Maybe this is a way to bluff. Maybe this is a way to have it. You have a 2-7 offsuit, and you say, well, maybe I'm going to raise. But I mean, I think the most likely scenario in Ontario would be spring, right? Mm-hmm. And so why not have a victory? If it's a safe victory, why not have a party? Why not show that neither the NDP in Ontario or the OLP have any traction and that the PC is invincible? I see this as a flexing muscles. Why not? Why not do it? You're going to win anyway, so why wait? Enjoy the victory and drink champagne.
Yeah, I'll take it. Okay, let's go to the mailbag. We're going to answer one question in the episode for the public, and then we'll have some more questions answered in our extended mailbag edition for our Patreon members, which you can join and become one at thenumberspod.ca, and that we'd appreciate it if you did. So we had a question here from Peter McKinney, and I thought it was an interesting one because it was a simple one to go through with the numbers, and then we can talk about kind of how big it has to be. Anyway, Peter says, it is often said that Diefenbaker's landslide was the biggest ever in Canada. Proportionately, given the number of seats in play, was Mulroney's bigger? And given your projections, is Poilievre's potentially bigger? So this is an easy one to answer. We can answer it very specifically. Yep. 1958, I went through the numbers. Diefenbaker won 208 seats out of 265. So this represented 78.5% of the House of Commons, which is insane.
Holy what? Yep.
In 1984, Brian Mulroney won more seats. He won 211, but the House had gotten bigger. It increased to 282, so he won 74.8% of the House. So Diefenbaker's landslide in 1958 remains the biggest that we've seen in Canada in terms of share of seats up for grabs. So if you apply that to our 343-seat House right now, Pierre Poilievre would need to win 270 seats to beat Diefenbaker's record. I think he'll beat the number. I think he could. I'm not going to say he will. I'm saying he could easily beat the record in raw number of MPs.
Yes.
Could he get to 270?
Okay, let's just for fun, for giggles. What does a 270-seat victory look for the Conservatives? The NDP is not a recognized party in the House of Commons.
No, they're down to probably 5.
The Monsieur Blanchet lives at Stornoway. And the Liberals are completely wiped out except Montreal and Toronto. That's it. Right? Am I?
Yeah.
Is there something else?
There's got to, so if let's say they win 270 seats, there's 73 seats left.
Yeah.
That you got to find to the other parties. But you got to imagine that if they're up to 270, they probably won some more seats in Quebec. So maybe the bloc's down to 25. I guess you could imagine a scenario where the bloc's at 25-30, the Liberals are at 25-30, and the NDP is at 10 or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, what does that mean? What is left? Jeez, like for the Liberals, they would have to be...
I'll tell you what's left.
Okay, what?
Like about 50 Conservative MPs that are disappointed not to be in cabinet. And then they may be... A big victory is not always a good sign, right? Diefenbaker's big victory was followed by a defeat.
It was 1984, a chaotic cabinet, and lots of people didn't know what to do with them, and they almost lost in 1962.
Exactly. And in 1984, Mulroney was kind of, he was in some ways lucky, but he was facing a completely destroyed opposition. He was able to hang on in 88, even though 88, it was kind of a much closer election, even though it was in the end, it was a comfortable majority. A big victory, like a huge blowout victory, is not necessarily a good news long term. You'll take the victory, of course. You'll take it. But long term, it's dangerous, right? So that's a fun thought experiment. But by the way, if I can just, before we go to other questions, just before we get into this, I've discussed this with people in the PQ and especially the Bloc Québécois. If, let's say, Yves-François Blanchet really is the leader of the opposition in Ottawa in the next parliament, should he live in Stornoway? Should he go there? I mean, there are two thoughts. I mean, Monsieur Bouchard would not go there. I'm living in Quebec. I'm staying in Gatineau. But the other argument was like, yeah, but Quebecers are still paying for it. Just you're paying for Stornoway. So why not go there? Maybe plant a Quebec flag in there, and
annex it.
Yes,
annex part of Rockcliffe.
I mean, if you want to be as annoying as possible to annoy the crap out of many English Canadians, and especially with the Parti Québécois rising in a poll, why not just show? I mean, I don't know. I don't know where you stand on it, but I can see both arguments being made. It's still hypothetical, but we're having fun here. Like, what do you think?
I bet you anything if that happens, he'll continue to have a place in Gatineau. I don't think he'll do that. But Stornoway, I'm not sure if it could be made secure enough for the PM to live in it. Like Poilievre lives there now. There's nowhere else for him to go because the PM, 24 Sussex isn't a residence. Yeah. I don't think Stornoway is because it's right in the middle of like a neighborhood. And it's got some fences and stuff, but I don't think they could make it into a compound for the PM. So, but anyway, I like the idea of just planting a big Quebec flag. You can put a poster, oui, tout est possible. Is that the slogan? Put that on the gate outside, and so all the wealthy people in Rockcliffe Park walking their dogs can
invite as many diplomats and world leaders and Quebec francophone artists to come to Stornoway. We're here now. We're the official opposition. It's if I'm for sovereigntists, it's not that bad of an idea, I think. But yeah, the symbolism of saying no, I'm staying at no is also kind of strong. But I don't know. It's fun. So we'll see.
Okay. All right, moving to the Patreon-only episode, or Patreon-only questions. All right, why don't we get to the quiz? You said you had a good one.
Okay, I have a quiz for you, and since this is a jam-packed episode, I think it's a faster quiz than usual. So it's who were premiers? Who were the premiers? Okay. So, do you want to go forward in time or backwards in time?
Backwards more challenging. I'll do backwards.
Backwards
I like
is
doing
more
backwards.
challenging. So basically, I'm going to tell you an event, a historical event, and on that day, I want you to tell me who were all the premiers in Canada on that day.
Okay.
And so there are, I have 3 events, and there are 29 premiers. 29 premiers.
Okay, so one of them is prior to 1949, I imagine.
And you get a point each. And what would be a good ceiling for that? Because I think you know most of these. You have on the RIT, your website, you have the Every Election Project. So you know all of this. It's just that I'm testing you from memory. So I'm going to say 24 out of 29 would be gold.
Do I have any strikes, or can I just keep trying to go? Just try to get them all.
No, you don't have any strikes. If you name a wrong one, it's wrong. That's it.
Oh, okay. So I'm done?
Yeah. Well, you're done for that province. You can go... Okay. You can go for all 10. Okay, so the evening, I'm not going to give you the date. I'm giving you the event, okay? On that evening, Barack Obama became the first African American to win a presidential election. It was a landslide, 365 electoral votes against Republican nominee John McCain. On that night, Eric, who were the 10 premiers?
All right,
1 point
it's
each.
November 2008. All right, so in British Columbia in 2008 would have been Gordon Campbell.
That's correct.
Alberta would have been 2008. It would have been Ed Stelmach.
That is correct.
In Saskatchewan would have been Brad Wall.
Correct also.
Manitoba would... Ooh, I'm going to come back to Manitoba. Ontario... 2008, Dalton McGuinty.
That's correct.
Quebec, Jean Charest, although I think they were in the midst of an election campaign at the time.
But it was Jean Charest, yep.
Yeah, okay. New Brunswick would have been Sean Graham.
That is correct.
Nova Scotia in 2008. Dexter came in 2009, so it would have been Rodney MacDonald.
Also correct.
PI.
Ooh, that's tough.
Ooh, that is tough. I think Robert Giz won in 2007, so I'm going to say Robert Giz.
Also correct. Wow.
Newfoundland Labrador in 2008 would have been Danny Williams.
That's correct.
And then
you run the table.
Manitoba, it's either Sillinger or Dewar. Is Sillinger there yet? I think that leadership race was 2009, so I'm going to say it was Gary Dewar.
And you have 10 out of 10 for that event. It was November 4th, 2008. So 10 out of 10. Okay.
All right.
Well, very good start here. Okay. Eric, that day, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds into its flight, killing all 7 crew members on board. This is like the earliest memory that I have, because I'm pretty sure I saw this live. And of course, we saw it many times after. But that morning, who were the 10 premiers? I'm not giving you the date. You should have an approximate idea of when it was, but the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds into its flight. Who were the premiers?
That was in 1989, right?
No, it wasn't.
No?
No.
Oh, no.
I guess I could give you the date.
Wait.
Because I figured I could give you the date, but it's too easy otherwise, right?
What year was that? 86?
It was 86, yeah.
Okay, it was 1986. I have no idea what month. But anyway, we'll try anyway.
Okay, all right.
1986. British Columbia had an election in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it was before
I should
or
give
after
you
the
the
leadership.
date. I'll give you the date. It was January 28th.
Oh, it's January. Okay.
In 1986. Yeah, I figured
Okay.
I should give you the date.
All right. Well, I should lose a point for not getting the date.
No. It's fine. It's fine. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so 1986, there was a leadership race in 1986 in British Columbia, but I don't think it was as early as January. So I would say that it was still Bill Bennett.
Yes, it was, of the
Okay.
Socreds.
Alberta would have been... Ralph Klein was in 93 or 92 or 93. So before him, I guess it would have been Don Getty.
Don Getty is correct.
Saskatchewan, it would have been Grant Devine.
Yes.
Manitoba in 86, oh boy. In 86. Was it Pauley?
Howard Pauley of the NDP.
Howard Pauley?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ontario would have been David Peterson, came in
Yes.
after 1985. Quebec would have been, 86 would have been Robert Bourassa,
Also
came
correct.
in 85. New Brunswick, McKenna came in 87, so it would have been Richard Hatfield.
That's right.
Nova Scotia, I have no idea who it is. Oh, wait. I think it would have been John Buchanan.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, yeah, 8. You're missing 2. PEI in Newfoundland.
I guess this was also around the time of like Meech Lake and stuff, right? PEI, I think at that time it was the father of Robert Giz, so it would have been Joe Giz.
That is incorrect.
Wrong.
There was an election on April 21st. On that day, it was James Lee.
I wouldn't have got that. And then in Newfoundland, at that point, it wasn't Newfoundland Labrador yet. 1986. Wouldn't have been. That would have been Brian Peckford.
And it was. Wow. Okay, so you're at 19.
Okay.
That's very good. What did I say for gold? It was 24.
24.
25. I said 24. Okay, so you need half of those. Well, more than half, because
You're going back though.
I'm going back. Yes. On that day, Nazi Germany begins its invasion of Poland, which, among many historical factors, triggers the start of World War II. This is September 1st, 1939.
I knew that date.
Yeah, well, I figured you would, right? 9 premiers, because Newfoundland is not in Confederation. You need 5 of 9 to win gold.
Okay.
September 1st, 1939.
Oh, that's tougher. This is going to be tougher. I'll skip BC for now. Alberta would have been William Aberhart.
You just mentioned him, absolutely, of the Socred. That's correct.
In the mailbag portion. I think that was in the Patreon edition. Saskatchewan 1939 would have been... so the CCF came in 1944, so it was the person who they defeated. His name was Patterson.
William John Patterson,
William
the Liberal,
John
is
Patterson.
correct. You got
Okay.
2.
Manitoba in 39 would have been John Bracken,
That's
because
3.
he would eventually come in to become the first PC leader. In Ontario, it was Mitch Hepburn, who became a big problem for Mackenzie King during the war.
Wow, that's 4.
Quebec. Oh, there was an election in 1939.
That's
right. But the election was to try to force out Maurice Duplessis. So he was still the premier in September 1939.
So you say Duplessis?
Yeah.
That is correct. You got 5. Try to run the table here. You win gold already.
New Brunswick, I just wrote something on who it was. So it was Alison Dysart.
Wow. Do you know that? Yes, it was.
Nova Scotia, it was Angus L. MacDonald.
Yes, it
who
was.
became a cabinet minister in the King government and then went back. PEI.
You're missing BC and PEI to run the table here.
PEI. I don't know who it could be in PEI. I'm going to say it was Campbell.
Thane Campbell or Fanny Campbell. That is correct. Oh my God!
British Columbia.
British Columbia is you have one mistake of the whole quiz. Can you have 28 of 29?
Oh man.
British Columbia.
It was
when
the
the
Liberals
World
who
War
were
II
in
started.
power. It was, or maybe with like coalition government. It was either Boss Johnson, which we talked about last time. I don't think it was, or it was Duff Patillo. Was he still there in 1939? Oh, man.
That is impressive. Why do we even do quizzes?
I think it was Duff Patillo.
The Liberal, it was Duff Patillo.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I just got one. The only one I got wrong was PI in 1986.
That's right. How dare you?
That's pretty good. I'm going to take that.
That's more than gold. That's platinum. Oh, my God.
And you know what? Newfoundland did not even have a premier at the time. They were at the Commission of Government where it was the British who were still running the province because they ran out of money during the Great Depression.
Dear listeners, for those who are asking when are Eric and I going to face off in a quiz, you just found out that it's never going to happen. Never going to happen. You have to throw in some hockey questions in there for me to have a chance or astrophysics, right? But aside from that, holy crap. All right.
I like that. I like that format. That's good.
You like it? How dare you miss PEI in 1986? Anyway.
Sorry.
Wow.
Number of the week. Why don't you
go ahead while I
Me?
Go ahead
Okay.
while I pull it up because I closed my window like an idiot.
Okay,
Go ahead.
mine is 11%. So this came from the Abacus data poll. It was the percentage of the entire electorate of decided voters, 11% of decided voters, who are currently supporting either the NDP, the Greens, or the Bloc Québécois, that would consider voting Liberal to block the Conservatives in the next campaign.
Yeah.
So that's the whole strategic voting cohort that the Liberals could target. What's interesting about that number, 11%, is that would still not be enough. Because you take the 11%, you add it to the 25% that Abacus had voting for the Liberals, they're up to 36%. That is still a win by 6 points for the Conservatives. Maybe it produces a minority, but any sort of vote efficiency numbers kind of get thrown out the window when we're talking about a collapse of the NDP, Green, and Bloc vote. So strategic voting alone might be able, in the current climate, might be able to reduce the Conservatives to a minority, but still would not be enough to put the Liberals in power again.
Wow. It would crush the NDP. That party would just go away. It would be in single digits in seats if that happened. But it's still a big stretch, but yes, absolutely. So my number of the week, it came from Research Co., the Vancouver-based poll. The approval rating. It's standard question. It's just that when I saw the approval rating, Justin Trudeau had plus 34 and minus 62, which I think is in the same range as other pollsters. You look at official opposition and Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, approve strongly or moderately, that number is now at 42% and only 37% disapprove. That's a plus 5 rating. It's high. It's gotten higher in recent polls. I mean, Pierre Poilievre was in the moderate negatives or even in most polls. We saw Abacus data in recent weeks having a higher approval rating for Pierre Poilievre, and now this Research Co polls has the same range. So it's not just that the Liberals and Trudeau is getting less popular, but Pierre Poilievre, even though there's still lots of resistance to him in a fraction of the population, his voters are with him. And so it's going to be harder and harder to chip away at that lead if Pierre Poilievre gets more popular. So we'll look at those trends in the future polls. Yep.
The closer we get to the election, the harder it becomes to move the numbers. And every day is passing, and we don't actually know how close we are to the election. It could be 14 months from now. Could be a lot less than that. So we'll see. But the next episode of The Numbers, you'll only have to wait 7 days. If you're a Patreon member, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. We'll have our next episode up on Thursday, and then we'll have our next public episode up in 2 weeks. So if you join the Patreon, you get those bonus episodes, you get the extended mailbag, you get to join the Discord, and you get early episodes on Thursdays rather than on Fridays. So it's a high value proposition. We think it's a good investment, and we appreciate your support. And if you're just listening and watching and you're enjoying the show, then we like that too. So, Philippe, we will have another week to see if there's going to be just as many polls. Maybe this was just a big rush and we'll have a big quiet week, but I'm starting to think people are ramping up and I'm excited about it. So hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about in 7 days.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great week.